The Lord be with you. So I've chosen my favorite gospel reading of all. It's the prologue from John's Gospel. And you'll notice that I add a line at the end, which is a line that we use also in our Eucharistic prayer of the Cosmos. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all humankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. You are such a Word. And these are words inspired by God. There we go, sorry. On November the 12th, which was the second Sunday of the month, we had our children's mass, our monthly children's mass, and Ursula did the presentation, and she read this book, which she had discovered in Germany, which I'd never heard of. I'd known about Neale Donald Walsch from other books he'd written, like Conversations with God, but I never realized that he'd written a children's book. And at the end of the reading that day, we had a discussion with the kids first, and then with the parents, and then with all of us present. And it was one of the most enlightening discussions I think I've ever been part of at COJ. I was really enamored of it. And then I found out some weeks later that Jerry discovered that there was a second book in this series, and he presented that last Sunday. But once I heard it from Ursula, in November, I figured out this is the one we need to do for the Christmas Day Mass. So I asked them both if they would go back and do these readings for us, and that I would devote the homily to try to tease apart the teachings of these beautiful little books. And that's what I want to do today. And I'm going to make 4 main points this morning. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the main characters in these 2 stories. And then secondly, I want to talk about the origin and the purpose of souls. And then thirdly, I want to talk about the notion of a preconception contract. And then fourthly, I want to focus particularly on the notion of forgiveness, because that was the whole objective that the little soul wanted to learn about forgiveness. I'm going to focus on that as the 4th point. So let me look then at the main characters in this. You've seen how they are. So firstly, there's the little soul, who appears as a little boy in the slides. And then there's the friendly soul, who appears as a little girl in the slides. And then there's God. And then there's the guardian angel called Melvin. So they're basically the 4 great characters that come through. But the really poignant part of this is the realization that in order to learn how to forgive, there has to be something and somebody to forgive. And there's this little girl soul who steps forward and says, I will teach you how to be forgiving. But you have to promise me this. You have to promise that when I give you an opportunity to forgive me, you don't forget who I am. Because I'm doing this out of love. I'm not going to do something bad because I love you, and I want to give you the opportunity of learning to forgive. And I may get so much into the part that I forget who I am. And if I forget who I am, and you respond to me in anger, you may forget who I am, and you may even forget who you are. And then we're both in big trouble. We've both forgotten. And then God has to send down a 3rd soul to remind both of us and to wake both of us up. Unfortunately, you and I know that 99.9999% of us on planet Earth, we've forgotten who the people are, the souls are, whom we need to forgive. We've forgotten who they really are, and we've forgotten who we are, and we've forgotten what the mission was that we set ourselves. And so God has had to send a 3rd soul in. And I wonder sometimes, is this actually the mission of Jesus Christ? Is this his forte? Does Jesus Christ move not just from planet Earth? So he came to planet Earth about 2,000 years ago, born in a stable in Bethlehem. Does he move from planet to planet, or from dimension to dimension, when a particular civilization is on the brink of forgetting as a species who they are or who God is? Is that in fact Jesus' forte, that he didn't just come to planet Earth to do this? Has he gone elsewhere to do this? When a civilization emerges in any planet, in such a place that we lose our connection with nature, and we get into technology, And there's the danger of, firstly, economic collapse. There's the danger of ecological degradation. There's the danger that thousands of species go extinct. There's the danger of self-extinction as a species. There's even the danger of the planet itself going extinct because of the shift from a nature-based civilization to a technologically based civilization. Is then that when God sends in Jesus Christ, he paratroops him into some area, planet Earth or elsewhere. And that this is Jesus' mission as a great soul that he is. That he comes in when the civilization is at that turning point. Because it can go in one way or the other. And his mission is to try to wake up all the participants. Not just as individuals, but as communities, to who they really are and why they've come. So is that perhaps, when we talk about the baby Jesus being born in Bethlehem, maybe he's doing this elsewhere constantly, moving from civilization to civilization, from planet to planet, and from dimension to dimension, at that crisis point when the civilization is on the brink of destroying itself because it has, made technology its guide. So they're the characters. I wonder then, when Jesus decided to come in, on planet Earth and be born as a baby in Bethlehem, so Jesus is perhaps, in some senses, both the third soul coming in to wake up the other two, and maybe sometimes he's the little soul who came in order to learn how to forgive. So who was the friendly soul in Jesus' life who gave him the opportunity to forgive? Was it Herod, who tried to kill him as a baby? Was it the Pharisees? Was it the Roman soldiers who finally killed him? Was it Judas who betrayed him? Was it Pilate who tried him? Were these friendly souls in the life of Jesus? How did he regard them? Because he forgave all of them. So what was his reaction on encountering these souls? Was he angry with them? Or did he realize, that they were giving him the opportunity of demonstrating forgiveness himself? So that's the first point I want to make. The second point then is this. I want to talk about the origin and the purpose of souls. So I am totally convinced that every soul is an emanation from source. I don't believe that God is a creator, in the sense that God makes stuff from nothing, decides I'm going to make elephants today, and earwigs tomorrow. Everything that exists is an emanation from source. It's a bite-sized piece of God. It's the way in which God experiences, because if you are the all, if there is nothing except you, then you can't experience, because there's nothing outside of you which you might experience. And so God plays this game of hide and go seek with herself by emanating bite-sized bits of self who are her proxy, who experience on her behalf. It's a little bit like, your eye is part of your body, but your eye can give you experiences that your elbow can't give you. But it's not doing it on behalf of the eye. It's doing it because the eye is part of the organism, and the organism is having experience, but the eye is a thing that's mediating a particular kind of experience. There's a kind of experience that only your ears can deliver to you. Your kidneys can't give you that experience, but both your ears and your kidneys are part of the organism. So the way in which the organism experiences music is through the ear. But the ear is not separate from the organism. The ear is an expression of the organism. So that every single soul is not separate from God. It's God's proxy. It's the way in which God, the totality, the organism we call God, experiences everything else. So that's the origin of all souls. But then there are young souls and there are old souls. And by young and old, I don't mean that there's a chronological difference between them. All souls are eternal. They issue forth from God. But so by young soul, we mean souls who haven't progressed very, very far. Souls who, when they incarnate, immediately and totally forget who they are, who the other is, and they suffer the illusion of thinking they're separate from God, they're separate from others, and they're separate from nature. And then they begin to act out of that fear-filled, little fragile ego place of separation. The really great souls, the old souls, maybe the Jesus Christ or the Buddhas of the planet, these are the ones who, even when they're incarnated, they still remember who they are. They still remember that they're bite-sized pieces of God. They still remember that it's an illusion to think I'm separate from other people or separate from nature. And then there's the rest of us. The rest of us are on the spectrum someplace in between. Most of us, learning to love our friends and hate our enemies. And so we get lost in this illusion, even though this is our mission, we've come from God in order to learn how to love. And part of the problem is that we constantly mistake, the mask that the actor is wearing for the person. We constantly mistake the personality for the soul who's playing the role of the personality. There's a huge difference. A personality is simply the interface between a soul and an environment. So if you put a soul in a different environment, a different personality will emerge. But often we mistake the mask the actor is wearing for the soul behind the mask. So we react as if, the actor, in fact, is the soul, and they're not. The actor is not the soul. This is not, Karen, or this is not Jean. There's a soul in there playing the part of Karen or Jean. So when we learn to relate to the soul inside the spacesuit, things are very, very different. So that the origin and the purpose of souls is to give God the opportunity of experiencing that which is not ourselves. That's my second point. The third point I want to make then is, you've heard me talk about this many, many times. I call it the preconception contract. That souls are like a Shakespearean troupe. Imagine we'd created a Shakespearean troupe in this COJ. And every year we put on a drama. And we move from city to city. We put on Palo Alto, and then Mountain View, and then San Carlos. And this year we put on Hamlet. And next year we put on A Midsummer's Night's Dream. And then 2 or 3 years down the road we do Macbeth. And we're the same people, but we play different characters. We may change even genders in order to play particular roles. And we do it in order, firstly, to entertain audiences, but secondly, to develop our acting skills. And by acting skills, I mean our ability to love completely. Because all virtues are just a different manifestation of love. There really is only one virtue. It is love. But love appears in many different guises, depending on what the context calls for. And there really is only one vice, and it is fear. And all of the other vices are just articulations of what it means to be afraid in different kinds of circumstances. So we formed this Shakespearean troupe because we want to develop the ability to love unconditionally. So we move from lifetime to lifetime as a group of souls, playing different roles, different nationalities, different IQ levels, different socioeconomic status levels, different genders, but we're the same group of people from COJ. Now, I think as we plan these incarnations, we draw from 2 different kinds of soul pods. There's our familial group that we get on really, really well with, and then there's the enemy group. I call it the shadow group. We pick people from the shadow group. Because if you're a gardener, you realize that weeding is perhaps even more important than fertilizing. If you're a farmer and you want to maximize your crop, you learn very, very quickly. Certainly when I was living in Africa on the equator with torrential rain and summer heat of 122 degrees temperature, if you put fertilizer on maize, you created a jungle unless you weeded it. So there are 2 kinds of people whom we draw into our lives. There are the fertilizers who love us unconditionally. And then there are the weeders who pick holes in our performance constantly. And we need both of them. And this is why Jesus will say, love your enemies. They are the weeders we all need weeders. If there were nobody in my life except those who love me unconditionally, I would become a total narcissist. If there were nobody in my life except weeders, I would become absolutely depressed. And so God gives us a sprinkling of weeders and fertilizers in our lives. So it becomes very, very important then that we realize that we have these contracts with each other in order to test. So when this little soul says, I chose to become your enemy, to become the bad guy, out of the love I have for you. What would happen in a soul contract if we could remember that the enemy figures in our lives are there because we have chosen to be in particular roles? Now, every single one of us, will find ourselves in a situation where you're the villain of the piece. You're the enemy to somebody. If you're not the villain of the piece in at least one person's life, you're anemic, insipid character. If you're the villain in everybody's life, you've got problems. But if you're not, making somebody uncomfortable, you're not doing something right. Because we've chosen people to be in our lives to stretch us. Because it's very, very important that we have these people. But we have to realize that in some level of the game, they came to be our enemies because they loved us. Now, if we could get that one thing into our minds as individuals and as nations, things would change radically. So the preconception contract is a system whereby we bring people into our lives so as to develop the kinds of virtues we're interested in. This little soul was interested in forgiveness. In some lifetimes, you want to develop patience. In another lifetime, courage. In another lifetime, compassion. So I think that personally, forgiveness and compassion are twins. You rarely find one without the other. It's almost impossible to find somebody who's forgiving, who's not also compassionate, or somebody who's compassionate, who's not also forgiving. They're like the twin virtues parts of love. But every lifetime we come in and we set ourselves one or two virtues we're going to work on for that particular lifetime, and we ensure that there are going to be people in our lives who test us to bring forth those particular kinds of virtues. I remember listening to a lecture a few weeks ago by a guy called Raymond Moody. He is the father of the near-death experience studies. And he was talking about, he's from, I think, North Carolina, and a small little town, and there's this troupe of professional actors come through the town, and they put on this play. And there's a hero in the play, and there's a heroine in the play, and there's a supporting cast, and then there's this arch villain, dressed appropriately with long black cape and a black stovepipe hat. And the whole play goes on, and at the end of the play, they come out to take their bow. And the hero comes out on stage, and everybody stands up and gives him a standing ovation. They're really delighted with him. And the heroine comes out, and she gets a standing ovation. And then the supporting cast come out together, and they get, mild applause. And then finally, the villain comes on stage with his long black cloak and his stovepipe hat. And Raymond Moody says, and there was total silence. For about a minute and a half, they couldn't differentiate between the extraordinary performance that this actor had given and the character he portrayed. They were so upset with the character, the villain character, that they forgot this was a performance by a brilliant actor. And then the realization begins to dawn, and they begin to applaud, and finally they stand up, and he gets the greatest applause of everybody else. He had done such an extraordinary performance. So often it's so difficult for us to differentiate between the role somebody is playing in my life and the soul who agreed to play that role in my life. That's the third point I want to make. And the fourth point then, focus in on the notion of the forgiveness. This is what the little soul came because he felt that, being special, a way of being special was learning to forgive. Now, what does forgiveness mean? Forgiveness does not mean excusing the bad behavior of another, and it certainly does not mean condoning the bad behavior of another. So what is forgiveness really about? Forgiveness is about the realization that I have bought into the illusion of separate identity, that I have forgotten that there were people who contracted in my life to come in and to test me. So the healing is in me. It's not justifying what the other person has done. It's not condoning what the other person has done. It's not excusing what the other person has done. It's the realization that I have to deal with the feelings, the situation called forth from me by learning to forgive. The healing comes from inside me. And in some senses, the other person is only parenthetical to the exercise. So why do we forgive? We forgive in order to heal the breach, to heal the illusion of the forgetting of who we really are. Because the truth is, in most situations where I'm upset with somebody else, it's true that I am capable of doing what they have done, or maybe even guilty of doing what they are doing to me right now. And secondly, the realization that any response to a situation which is not coming out of love is merely throwing kerosene on the fire. Any response, no matter how grievous the situation is, any response which is not coming out of love is throwing kerosene on the fire. Now, by love, I don't mean, just, it's okay, do it, lie down, walk over me. There are four very different kinds of love, in my opinion. There's the love, I call it the 4 C's. There's the love of confirmation, where you say to somebody, attaboy, great job, you did a powerful job here. You encourage them for what they're doing in life. That's the confirmation love. The second kind of love is complementarity, where we're members of a team and you've got some function and I've got a function, and we love each other, each of us, by compensating, from or complementing what the other person is doing. We're team players. The third one is compensation, where somebody makes a mistake and I rush to their rescue to help them out so that the mistake is kind of, in some senses, healed immediately. That's the first 3 kinds of love. And the fourth kind of love is confrontation, where you call somebody on their stuff. And Christ did this in spades with the Pharisees. But always it comes from love, not from a bruised ego. If I confront you from a bruised ego, there's no love involved in it. I'm simply pouring kerosene on the fire and forgetting that you are offering me the opportunity of learning to love and learning to forgive. So it becomes really, really important then that we understand that forgiveness is really about self-healing. It's healing the breach between God and other and self and nature, because there is no difference between us. Every single one of us is just an eye or an ear or a kidney or an elbow on the body of God. Now, when you look at the players then, does God forgive? No, God does not forgive. God is the only being in the universe that doesn't forgive. Because to forgive, you first have to hold a grudge and then let go of it. And God is utterly incapable of holding a grudge. And so God says again and again and again, no matter what you do, I don't have a problem with it. So God is the only being who doesn't forgive, because God can't forgive since God can't hold a grudge. So it becomes really, really upsetting to me then, as a theologian, when I read stuff like the notion that, for instance, God rejected the Jews for some breach of a covenant somewhere, and he chose the Roman Catholic Church instead. That God rejected the whole nation. Now, the idea that he has chosen people is equally ridiculous. God does not play favorites. But the idea that he had chosen people, but they broke the covenant and he rejected them because he was really upset with them, doesn't make any sense to me. And then he chose the Roman Catholic Church. But then God has a special rule. And so if you commit a mortal sin, the Catholic Church, God rejects you forever. You go to hell for all eternity. So the notion of mortal sin. Now, that's not to say that there are not serious things we can do that upset, whole societies or relationships. But they're not mortal in the sense that they stop God from loving us. There is nothing we can do that can stop God from loving us. Any more than, imagine you're watching, sunlight stream down from heaven, and you go out with a shearing prunes, and you try to shear off a ray of sunlight and put it in a black box and take it downstairs and put it in your basement. You can't do that. You can't slice off a sunbeam and stick it in a box and separate it from the sun. You can't do that. You can't separate a soul from source any more than you can separate a sunbeam from the sun. So there is no way. God doesn't forgive because God can't forgive, because God doesn't know anything except love. So the whole notion of mortal sin, where we're rejected for all eternity by God, or that God rejects one nation and chooses another, is ludicrous. Now, what about Jesus then and forgiveness? It's very, very obvious that this was maybe the one teaching that he came back to most frequently in his life, because he got it. Jesus is one of those beings who remembered that he was a little soul, or that he came down to try to wake up the little souls and the friendly souls who have forgotten what the contract was. But in his own teaching again and again and again, in the one great prayer that he taught us, the Our Father, that's the core line. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. He'll come back to this notion of forgiveness again and again and again. And he will certainly demonstrate it in his own life, right up to the last breath he takes, where pretty much his last statement is looking down at the soldiers who are just bored out of their mind and dividing up his garments, and the high priests who are mocking him, and the crowds who think it's just like Sunday afternoon football. And he says, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they are doing. So his last breath, is an example of his teaching, which brings it down to us and the notion of forgiveness. Now, there's self-forgiveness then, which is very important. And self-forgiveness is a dance, because I need to forgive myself, but I also need to hold myself accountable. And in order to do that, I have to juggle my human nature and my divine nature. Now, I think it's a mistake to think theologically that Jesus Christ was the only person ever who had two natures, a divine nature and a human nature. Every single one of us has a divine nature and a human nature. Every single one of us is a bite-sized piece of God who's volunteered for incarnation. So we have a human side and we've got a divine side. So what is self-forgiveness is when the human side screws up a little bit. I have the courage, to say, yes, I screwed up. But I have to forgive myself in the sense that I'm not a bad person. I'm a person who made a mistake. But I can't be so easy on myself that I don't grow and I don't change. So it's a dance between narcissism and depression. Self-forgiveness is a dance between narcissism, where I can't do anything wrong, and depression, where I can't do anything right. That's the dance of self-forgiveness. But maybe the most important point I want to make as I finish this morning is this. This notion of forgiveness, this contract that souls make with each other, out of love, that I would be a difficult person in your life to give you the opportunity of developing compassion or patience or forgiveness, whatever it is. That is not just done on a personal level, though it is very important there. And it's important for us in all our kind of interpersonal disputes to wake up to that realization that the difficult people in our lives are maybe the most important gifts that we have built into the contract of our life. If we could remember that, it would totally change the dynamic of interpersonal conflicts. It would change the dynamic of international politics if we realized that entire nations, I believe, make soul contracts with other nations. So there are some nations who are the bad guys in order to elicit from us, some kind of response. The greatest mistake we have made as a country, in my opinion, was the aftermath of 9/11, when the whole world got behind us in compassion. And what do? We go in and we bomb the hell out of Afghanistan, and then we go into Iraq and a whole bunch of other places. We have this opportunity to be a Christian nation in the real sense, to find out the enemy figure. What are they asking of us? What's the contract? Not just forgiving and say, it's okay, so, you can bomb whatever you like. That wasn't it. Could we forgive in the sense that we create a totally different way of doing international politics? That was the invitation for the United States of America in 2001, and we blew it. We blew it royally, and we're still paying the piper for that. But maybe the most important point of all, there's the individual interpersonal dynamic and the contract we have with other souls. There's the international contract we have between nations. What's ripping our country asunder right now, in my opinion, is the contract internally in this country between different parties in this country, between conservatives and liberals allegedly, between progressives and neocons, between Democrats and Republicans. All of them claiming that the other crowd, are putting out the fake news and the propaganda. This is our contract, guys. As Americans in the year 2017, this was a contract we made to be part of a nation and part of our history, when we are being invited to look at the bad guys at the other side of it, whatever side the other side is, and realize they're here because we choose to be here, and they came because they love us. What would happen in American politics today, and even in your own heart, as you kind of listen to the television or watch the fake news which is coming from all sides, if you realize that this actually was a contract that we as Americans made for the year 2017 and 2018. And that we look at the people at the other side, whatever the other side is, and realize they're doing what they're doing out of love for us. And can we distinguish between the role they're playing and the character of the soul behind the role? If we could see the souls behind that and realize that we're creating a drama in order for everybody to grow, to learn patience, to learn love, to learn compassion, and to learn forgiveness, we could change the face of America literally in one single year. So I'll throw it open for discussion at this stage. It's not an easy path, because easy paths don't lead to growth. If you're interested in becoming a really kind of buff, athletically fit person, you're not going to walk on tarmac, on a level road. You're going to go mountain climbing. And so we've set ourselves as souls, as individual souls, as national souls, as international species-wide, human souls. We've set ourselves this task of growing through this extraordinary critical time in the evolution of Gaia, Pachamama, in which we're being called to move from, a kind of a self-engrossed, technologically driven kind of consumerist profit margin mentality into respect for our mother, respect for the planet, and respect for the fact that this is a garden in which we're meant to evolve into being loving, unconditionally loving human beings. That's the crisis point. And I'm glad we're here right now. We get an opportunity, our generation of human beings have an opportunity to make the shift into Christ consciousness. But it's not going to come by playing along party lines, or by buying into fake news, or by blaming the others, whoever they are. Yeah. Because I'm sure that many other planets in many other parts of our galaxy and of our universe have reached this critical stage in the past. Some have made it, and some haven't made it. And maybe the Christ figures are the ones who go in to intervene, to try to wake up everybody, at that critical stage. And we certainly need, that kind of intervention nowadays. And it's going to be us. It's going to be ordinary human beings. The politicians are not going to do it. The churches are not going to do it. The leaders are not going to do it. Corporate America is not going to do it. It's going to come from ordinary people waking up in small little communities, and acting out of that place in interpersonal dynamics, in what you choose to look at and what you choose to ignore. Maybe it's time to be doing news fasts because we're just getting fake news from all sides anyway. Bonnie.
So something has happened inside me, which is that when I do my morning kind of prayer, my sort of a salutation, abbreviated one, I say at one point, I offer this day for the evolution and ascension of humanity, including Trump, Putin, the lord of whatever it is in the Congo, Assad. And then I think it comes up in my mind about their evil, and then what comes up in my mind is my evil. And so I sort of acknowledge that I have the evil in me, maybe not as bad as their evil, but it's bad. Well, I don't know what to do with that, so then I just go on and then pray for a couple of people that I'm praying for. But that I'm sort of stuck. I know what you're saying today, but I'm sort of stuck in that.
Okay. So there's a few different things you can do, Bonnie. The first one is that there's obviously a shift in your mindset. There's a shift in your cosmology, where it's not just a clear case of the bad guys and the good guys. There are no good guys and bad guys. There are only God guys. Every one of us is a God guy. Every one of us is an incarnational probe from source. So no matter what roles we're playing. So when you shift your mentality and you realize that we're here by contract as individuals in interpersonal relationships, as intercommunity relationships and as international relationships, when you get that, your mindset is very different. So what do you do then? My advice would be, personally, I don't have a television, I've never had a television, I don't have a radio, and I don't read newspapers, because I realized as a young man that it's all propaganda anyway. Whoever's in charge is putting out the story they want us to believe in. So we're getting fake news from all sides. So maybe when you realize that, do some kind of a news fast. Wean yourself off the mass media in some way. Get your information elsewhere, however you need to do it, but to try to get it from a more balanced perspective. But then on a very, very individual basis, when you shift your mindset, as you're talking about, Bonnie, when you shift your mindset, just as you're talking about right now, if you can start building that realization into your interpersonal relationships, that so with people you heretofore regarded personally as difficult people, and you realize, my God, this was an agreement that this person and I made before we incarnated, because it's allowing me to develop patience or compassion or love, whatever it's asking of you. So to walk the talk where you're at, we're on the tarmac in interpersonal relationships. And if we start changing the energy, interpersonal relationship by interpersonal relationship, the dynamic of the group shifts and the dynamic of the planet shifts. It takes less than 10% of a population of any community to change in order for the energy of the entire group to change. There was one famous Margaret Mead who said one time, never doubt the ability of a small group of dedicated people to shift the world. She said, nothing else ever has. And it's true. If you shift the energy on an interpersonal level, and enough of us are doing that, the dynamic of the whole group changes and the international will follow. Margaret.
I think about this thing that Bonnie was talking about a lot, and I'll wake up and I'll, try to have a morning prayer, or at night, and then I get stuck in the pain, and so what I'm doing right now sometimes is I read things that are just, they're not really trash, but they're
Nice.
they're not, they get me away from myself. And I thought about that. I mean, that is a pain mediation where you don't think about the pain. You get yourself involved, whether you're playing music or listening to music or whatever it is, so that you forget that pain. It's physical pain is what I'm talking about. And that, you can do that psychologically. But then I get stuck there because am I running away? Am I avoiding? Is it an avoidance thing? Is it doing anybody any good? So it's sort of all of these questions, and sometimes I get a little answer and work on that, and then sometimes that I know it's right, but I can't grasp it.
Okay. It's a great question, Margaret. So the thing is, if a situation is causing you pain, this is not just Margaret, but everybody else. If a situation is causing you pain, and you know what the origin of the pain is, take it away. If there's a pebble in your shoe, which is really, really uncomfortable, the more you walk on it, the more uncomfortable it gets. Stop, take off your shoe, and throw away the pebble. So whatever it is that's feeding the pain, and my opinion is that what's feeding the pain at the moment is the mass media on all sides of the equation. They're feeding this, they're creating this divide in our country right now. So why would we continue to kind of bathe in this and allow this kind of sludge? It's almost like, pardon the graphic nature of it, it's like your toilet is backing up, into your sitting room through your television set. It's not backing up in the bathroom, it's backing up in your television room. All this bilge that's coming through, and we're sitting there feeding on it, and we wonder why we're in pain. We're in pain because we're swimming in the stuff. So kill your television or your radio or whatever, and immerse yourself, in stuff that makes you feel good about life. You're not running away. You're trying to create the energy of love. Change your cosmology, like we were just talking about now. When you realize that all the players in the drama right now are part of a contract to wake America up. But it's not waking us up by pointing fingers at each other. It's not waking us up by sending intercontinental ballistic missiles across the world or drones to kill people in Pakistan. That's not waking up. That's going deeper and deeper into the darkness. You're waking up when we become Christ-like. We wake up when we realize that these people deserve our love. These people deserve our respect. They deserve, aid with hospitals or education or agriculture. They don't deserve drones. Drones are not going to fix the situation. Agriculture may, medicine may, education may, ambassadors may, but certainly drones are not going to do it. But we're being constantly whipped up into a frenzy now. Let's go make war at North Korea. There's crazy guy, Kim Jong-un, up there, And meanwhile, they're telling our crazy guy here, so two crazy guys pointing ICBMs at each other. That's not waking up. But you chose it not to bathe in it. You chose it as a way of waking up from it. Right. That's the important thing. You didn't choose the pain in order to become a masochist and indulge yourself in further pain. You chose the pain is always a wake-up call. The pain is an indication that the body or the psyche is in discomfort, and you figure out what's causing the discomfort. And it may be, as you said, familial, it may be community-wide, it may be international. You figured, okay, that's where the pain is coming from. So now what do I do in order to alleviate that pain or change the circumstance? So now you got, it's like you go to the doctor and you got chest pains and you get x-rayed and you find out you got TB. Now you know what you have. You can do something about it. If you don't know what it is, you can't do anything about it. So you have to identify what the cause of the pain is and then take steps appropriately. And it always is, there's only one sin. I keep saying this to you. There's only one sin. It's to be asleep. To consciously decide not to wake up. Because waking up, it takes a lot of energy. And it takes a lot of commitment. It's much easier to stay asleep and just be fed this kind of pablum, and go along with the herd mentality than is to wake up and take a stance and be a Christ-like person. Yeah. Let me grab a microphone here. Sorry, Chris was first, and then we bring it up. Sorry, Chris was first.
I was going to say, it's hard to, the radio died in my car, which was a huge gift, It's like, fine.
Muzzle tough. Somebody was praying for you.
Seriously, it died, and everybody goes, well, why don't you fix it? And I'm like, no, it's fine. So I use that time when I'm driving to senior communities to pray, or I'll be thinking or whatever. And I realized that it's hard to do that all the time. So I years ago bought this table, and it was incredibly heavy. It's made out of yew wood. And the idea was that I was going to meditate at that table. And basically what it's become is an altar. And so I have beautiful pictures of Jesus. And when I feel, when something comes up or I hear about someone, I park their name or their picture next to those beautiful pictures of Jesus, and I feel that I may not be praying for them consciously all the time, but they're there in that energy, and I really do feel that work is being done at that table with the rocks on it and the shells on it and some crystals and things from my childhood. But I think it's important to have a space like that in your home where you feel like, you know, this is my safe place. This is where I'm going to put you because I love you. And I may not even know you, but I'm going to write your name on a piece of paper, and I'm going to put you right there in between these two pictures of Jesus because I love you, even though I don't know you.
That's beautiful, Chris. So, I mean, two of the most important things we can do is creating sacred space and sacred time in our day. Sacred space where we're dedicated to this connection with God, and sacred time where, you know, we do the kinds of exercise or prayers that you mentioned. I want to welcome Ari before we get... Ari, can I get a hug? Yeah. Hi, Pookie Bear. Are you hugging people yet? Hey, buddy boy. This is Ari. How you doing, bro? What's up, dude? What did you come to do? What's your mission on planet Earth? Yeah? You've got to figure it out. How old is he now?
15 months.
15. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So the next question is here.
I've always asked myself this, and I've always wondered what the answer will come out to be, is when will humanity start helping humanity?
Interesting. Beautiful. Yeah, that's what it's about. When will humanity start helping humanity? When we realize that every single person is a bite-sized piece of God. We're not separated by ethnicity, we're not separated by gender, we're not separated by skin color or by language or by socioeconomic status. There are no separations. You know, one is an eye, the other is an elbow. One is a kidney, the other is an ear. We're all parts of the organism of God, you know, having experiences. When people wake up to that realization, so you remember the little soul in this story, as soon as she was born, she already forget who's God, who are you talking about, and what do you mean that my mission was to forgive? So when we're born, we have amnesia created for us for what's gone before. There's a beautiful teaching in Judaism that talks about the angel of night called Ayala. And just before a baby is born, the angel of night pinches the child's nostrils and impresses the upper lip, and that's why you've got a little indentation here and at the sides of your nose. So God is the angel is pinching you to create amnesia for who you really are. Because part of the journey and part of the mission is to wake up to who you are. If we remembered immediately, it'd be a piece of cake. There'd be no stress involved in it. So part of the mission is to wake up to what the mission actually was. So you're absolutely right. When human beings realize we're not separated from each other, we're bite-sized pieces of God, then humanity will stop beating up on humanity. Yeah. Ingrid was next. And then Ron. Sorry.
Thank you for your beautiful service today. I really felt the spirit of Christ consciousness. Thank you, everybody. For me, one of the biggest understandings is about the disturbance in the particle field, about humanity. How we have this deception that we're born in original sin, and it creates a core sense of unlovability, unworthiness. And for me, just trying to love, accept myself. One shaman said we have to learn to love what we hate about ourselves. And this is the holy work that I feel we're here to do, is love and honor our own life. And when we can do that, we can shift our consciousness, and we have a greater capacity to love because we're finally actually able to do it for ourselves. And if we could just be more loving and compassionate and accepting and tolerant of our own human foibles and ignorance and all that, we can raise the consciousness of the planet. And that's the most important thing, to raise ours, which raises the planetary consciousness.
Brilliant, Ingrid. And so it goes back to the notion of perfection, because perfection is always misunderstood. We think perfection is achieving a stainless steel, sinless state, you know, of being. That's not perfection. The word which is translated into English from the Greek original in the scriptures is the word telos in Greek, from which we get the English word teleology. And teleology is to be attracted to an end. We are much more, in my opinion, we are much more products of our future than we are of our past. We're not driven so much by our past, you know, behavior into who we are, as we are lured by our future possibilities into becoming whom we are meant to be. So the real meaning of perfection is to be committed to the purpose for which I incarnated. That's the absolute meaning of perfection. So it doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. Part of the journey, you know, of growing is making mistakes. It's like the word sin, in fact, in Greek, is taken from archery, is to miss the bullseye. But that's very important, because the feedback I get tells me, oh, you're aiming too high or too far to the left. Now I readjust my aim. So a sin is a vital feedback mechanism that allows me to up my performance. So sin and perfection go together. One is learning through feedback, and the other is realization that as long as I'm committed to my goal, it doesn't matter how many times I fall. As long as I get up, like this little child, how old was he when he started walking? 11 months. How many times did he fall in the process?
Actually not that often.
Really? You're a very advanced soul, are you? Yeah.
He didn't start walking until he was really stable.
Really still. Very, very wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very cautious.
Most kids are going to fall a lot before they get it right. So it's the feedback. We try, we get it wrong, we pick up again. So, you know, perfection is being committed to the purpose which I incarnate. It does not mean not making mistakes. Ron was next. Do you want to grab the mic, Ron?
You seem to be in touch with what's going on in the world. If you don't listen to radio and you don't watch television, where do you get your information?
I choose podcasts and I choose, you know, internet sites which give, in my opinion, a much more balanced picture for what's out there. I also have had the ability, having lived in 3 different continents, I can smell bullshit very, very quickly. In any language, in 6 languages, yeah. And so it gives me a nose, in this instance, for finding out when stuff stinks. Anything that's creating prejudice, anything that's creating fear, anything that's creating anxiety, anything that's creating xenophobia, anything that's creating the bad guys and the good guys, I stay away from that immediately. That's not, you know, that's not good news. And it's not even news. It's the same old stuff we've been getting, you know, since the Roman times. So I choose very carefully where, you know, I'm going to pick my information from. And as somebody else mentioned, I've been meditating for 52 years. I meditate every day. I pray a lot every day. I think a lot every day. So I figure stuff out for myself. Because there are 3 ways in which we learn stuff. The first way we learn stuff is some authority figure tells us. A scientist tells us, or the mass media tell us, or the parents tell us, or the priest tells us. That's the first way we learn. The second one is we experience stuff for ourselves. And the third one is we figure stuff out for ourselves. You get a jigsaw puzzle with 2,000 pieces, you sort them out, and you figure out the puzzle. Now, none of these is infallible. All of them can make mistakes. But if I cross-fertilize the 3 of them, I'm less likely to make mistakes. So I think a lot for myself. I've had a lot of experiences in 71 years of living in 3 different continents, you know, and I've had some really good teachers, you know, and cross-fertilizing those, I'm trying to navigate my way using the orienting principles that if it leads me into fear, anxiety, prejudice, xenophobia, anxiety, I know that's not true. That's not, when Christ said, I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. I know anything that takes me into darkness, you know, or fear or anxiety, I'm not interested in that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, that's fine. We'll take one more question. It's 11:30, guys, and we still have to get on with us. Karen.
So it's a couple of things. I think that the real difficulty for me in terms of forgiveness is being willing to understand that given a different set of circumstances, I might be doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, totally.
And so it takes a lot of kind of the introspection to look at that. And I think that once I, you know, a few times that I do manage it, then the compassion just follows so easily. because you know that it somehow goes beyond that. The other thing I was going to say is I think a lot of the distress now is just the separation that you're talking about. That people really feel that. It's just this visceral, emotional, terrible thing. And what the media and other things are doing is feeding that with a kind of negative energy that feels like you're alive. It feels like you're connected to a part, but you're not. It's like a foolishness. You're connected to a piece, but not the whole thing. But you think you're connected, but it's false.
Totally.
And so
Because there's a
those
huge
are my
difference
thoughts.
between energy and life. You can be energetic, in the pursuit of genocide, but that's not life-giving. So being energized for a cause that we don't fully understand and we're being driven by people who have 7 different levels of motivation above and beyond what, we believe, staying away from that is very important. The other piece is the realization that at a deep, deep core, I think there are ways in which we experience the shadow side of ourselves regularly. I think if you've ever had reincarnational experiences and you realize that some of the past lives that I've lived, I'm really ashamed of at this stage. And the second clue I have is, occasionally when I'm dreaming at night, I find myself in situations in which I do things that I would be ashamed of, as Seán ÓLaoire, the waking character. And I ask myself, am I responsible for what I do in my dreams? I don't even recognize myself sometimes. Because I think that sometimes dreams are a place where parallel universes bleed into each other. And so there's a lifetime I'm living, where I'm a mafia don or something. And occasionally I'll dream of things, doing actions that I'm deeply embarrassed about doing, as Seán ÓLaoire. And so if I just even pay attention to my dreams or my past life experiences, I know that I'm capable of doing all this kind of bad stuff. So that's another reason for forgiving myself, firstly, and forgiving others who are caught in their dream right now. Guys, it's 11:30. I'm going to have to call it quits there, and we continue with our Mass.